Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the automation mini series. We are absolutely delighted to have you here, and especially delighted to have Jean Turner here. Jean, thank you very much in advance for this session and for joining us as well. For those of you that have been tuning in to the automation mini series, this is episode number 5. And in this one, as you can see from the title slide in front of you, Jean's going to be looking at how to choose a solution, and particularly kind of drilling down on a whole bunch of different tools that go into making that decision, and lots more, I'm sure, as well. Our thanks especially to Lawhawk for being one of our co-collaborators and partners in developing, designing, and rolling out this series. And Jean, with that having been said, I'll hand it over to you, and thank you again very much in advance.
Thanks, Terry. So the reason for this session is really because there's just so many choices in the legal automation space, and it can look like they're all very similar in many respects and quite hard to make choices. And if you don't really know what it is that you're looking for, then you're naturally going to have some concerns that you might end up making the wrong choice for your needs. Or more likely, perhaps, you just might not make any choice at all, which is what people do when they find they've got more choices than they know what to cope with. So the aim for today is really just to help you to know what you might want to look for and help you to feel more confident that you can make a good decision in this space. But ultimately, I guess you're always going to have to still make a decision and take some degree of a leap of faith. So in terms of materials and notes, don't worry about taking detailed notes for today. I'm going to try and cover quite a lot of ground in a short space of time, but the session's recorded and it's going to be available on YouTube, so you can come back and look at it in as much or as little detail afterwards as you would like. And we'll also make a copy of the slides available after as well. I'd suggest that what you could do would be to go back to the CLI's YouTube channel and take a good look at the Legal Techie Tuesday videos that are on there. There's a huge range of different technologies there, including all of the companies that are involved in this series, including Lawhawk, Checkbox, Nyota, Joseph, Avoca are all in there, amongst others. And you'll see a lot of the key features and things that I'm referring to if you look at those. And also, I'd just go back and look at the earlier webinars as part of this series that I'm really trying to build on. And this will hopefully make a lot of sense as well. So in episode 1, we had Giles Thompson from Avoca was talking about what legal automation is and why you should care about it. Episode 2 was about how you can use legal automation to solve bigger business problems, and that was Mark Tyndall and myself. Episode 3 was what should I automate and how to choose your automation projects. That was Tom Dreyfus from Joseph with Gary Adler and Anna Golovsky. And episode 4 just recently was Evan Wong and Alex Rosenroch from Building a Business Case, and that from Checkbox. So a little bit about Lawhawk and this session. We're a little bit different from the other companies involved in the program because unlike them, Lawhawk's not actually a legal technology platform. We're legal automation consultants, and our goal is to try and find the best technology that we can use to help our customers to achieve the outcomes that they want. And we're pretty much happy to work them with any of the technologies that have been shown in this series and others, depending really on what the requirements of the job are. So I'm not going to get into specific or general recommendations about this product or that because it really does depend. One of the big challenges really is just the number of options that are available. There's literally hundreds of document automation technologies that are out there, and there's new ones coming out all the time, and all of them are claiming to be doing at least something differently, but a lot of it actually also looks like it's pretty much the same or not particularly new. So there's a wide number of technologies out there that I haven't spent any time looking at and wouldn't necessarily do so because I can pretty much see that they're not doing anything greatly different to the software that we already have and that we can work with. But there's also a huge number out there that actually would be really great to work with, and I'm sure would be absolutely fine, but I just haven't had the time to look at them and haven't felt the need to because the software that we've got is already doing what we need it to at this stage. And that's really a key thing, is to find something that works for you and that you're comfortable, that you know what it does. And so we try to work with software where we know what it can do, and that really helps us with scoping our jobs and being able to be certain in terms of what we can deliver. We have a lot of pre-built automation that we've already tried and tested, and so that makes it a lot easier to be able to deliver quickly and to a high standard. And with new software, you'd have to rebuild it and retest it. And then the other key thing is having partners that you're familiar with and that you have relationships with. So if you do run into challenges, then you've also got confidence that you'll be able to work through those together. So those are all really important things in terms of when you pick a solution, having the confidence in about how you can use it. We do always keep an eye out, though, for other problems that customers tell us they have, and gaps in the solutions that we currently work with, and looking for other tools that might be able to help in those circumstances. So the golden rule, the most important thing that I would suggest that you should really focus on is always keep in mind what is the outcome that you need to achieve. If you keep that front and center, it goes a very long way to being able to filter out all the other noise and to work out what it is that's going to be most important for you. And the outcome that you need to achieve is unlikely to just be a document, which seems odd in the context of document automation. But really, when you think about it, it's much more likely that you're going to be working with a customer or a supplier, and you're going to be trying to jointly achieve some outcome together. And that's actually the outcome that you need to achieve. The document itself is just one small step along that process. So you've got to focus on what it is you're trying to achieve. In an employment space, you're not really trying to get an employment agreement or a letter of offer or something like that. You're trying to actually find the best employee for your business and to get them to agree to come and work with you and get them onboarded and working as quickly and as efficiently as possible to make them a valuable employee. You might have an overall organizational outcome to reduce costs or to increase revenue. And so that would be the key focus in that circumstance, not the particular inputs in terms of documents and individual steps. You may have overall transaction timeframes that you're aware take a lot longer than what you would ideally like. And so your goal might be to take a process that currently takes 10 weeks and see if you can get that down to a matter of days or even hours. Or you might have legal compliance issues. And if you're really worried about how to make sure that people in the wider business understand and are complying with their legal obligations and requirements, then that's the key thing that you need to keep your focus on. So those types of things is what you should use to underpin your business case, and also to make sure your evaluation is consistent with them. And then that way you can avoid getting distracted by process and the dozens of features that will get thrown at you. Another way to look at things might be using the jobs to be done framework. So many of you might have heard of the kind of story about whether or not a person's trying to buy a drill or actually they need a hole. And you can extend that quite a lot further and also perhaps look at your document automation through the same sort of framework. So you could think about it this way. Maybe it is just a DIY situation where you really do just want to drill and you're planning to do everything else yourself. But maybe you're looking for perhaps somebody who can drill the holes for you, but you'll tell them exactly where to do that. That would be sort of a basic automation support. Slightly more complex would be if you got them to drill the holes and also hang the painting for you. And getting more advanced again would be getting somebody to actually do the painting for you and hang it. So that's more of an overall solution. In the subscription economy, you may not actually need to own the painting. You might decide that you just want to use it for a while and then be able to swap it out if you decide you're no longer happy with it. And you can do the same thing now in an automation sense, where there are automated solutions that actually can be just paid for and used for as long as it makes sense. Like any renovation, sometimes you actually need to do some preparation before you can get started. And in a automation sense, quite often we see people that need to put quite a lot of effort into their templates before they're ready to be automated, whether that's formatting issues, the quality of the drafting, or having multiple different versions of pretty much the same template that need to be consolidated down. So, you may want help to prepare that before doing the automation. you might be looking for an overall design and build solution, someone that can come in, help you to work out all the different areas where you might be able to make improvements and then help you to do it. And you could be looking for something way more drastic, like a complete re-engineering if the process really is so bad that you want to start again, knock down the wall and completely go open plan, for instance. And it's also possible that you don't necessarily know what it is that you need. You just want somebody who will be able to help you as and when needed as well. So there's a really wide variety of models and different types of support that might be available depending on what it is that you're actually trying to achieve and how you want to go about doing things. So there's some really key considerations that I would start with in terms of thinking about what I want from a solution and how I might start to evaluate which ones I'm going to do a deeper dive on. And so the first one would be the concept of intake. So yeah, when you're going to create all these documents, you're going to have to get information either from people or other systems to be able to enter it to create the document. And so there's different ways you can do that. You could have a legal team or a law firm, for instance, who are going to have to get information from the business customers or clients. And so you have to think about how you'll do that. At a most basic level, some people are still working with Word documents and getting instructions in that way. It could come through and through forms with emails, or it could be direct feeds of data. Obviously, the documents are likely to be a reasonably core part of the solution, but they'll come in different forms, complex or quite simple, and there could be just one or a number of them. Understanding what the documents are and where they fit into the process will be key. Calculations is another thing that can be important. So a number of the good systems can also not just take bits of information where you need to ask a question for every detail, but they can do calculations. And that might be a simple thing, such as taking the number of widgets being sold and the price per widget and doing a calculation as to the total price. It could also be summing up the totals of a series of repeats, or it could be something even far more complicated, calculating net present values. So some of the different software solutions have very complex calculation capability, which can add a lot of value if that's something that you need. As well as documents, there might also be the need to take information in and present answers, which is sort of the expert system concept. So you might have, for instance, an intake tool where somebody comes in and they enter some information to work out whether or not they need to have a privacy agreement for transferring information cross-border, which is one project that we've worked on. So based on some initial information that the user can enter, you could tell them that either they do need to have an agreement, in which case you can step them through further details to create the document, or it might be enough to be able to say, based on the answers that you've given, you actually don't need an agreement at all, and that can be incredibly valuable. All of these systems generate a lot of data, and one of the key things that you'll want to consider going forward is what could you do with all that data? If you capture it, can you share it with others that would find it useful and interesting, and how could you present it either into other systems for analytics or maybe for dashboards for reporting? Increasingly, people are interested in not just the documents, but broader workflow. So that would be something else that you want to think about. What happens in terms of draft documents? Can they be sent to somebody else for review and approval? How do we fit around delegated authorities? Who gets notified? And a lot of the stuff obviously needs to work between individuals, but also across teams and maybe even internal or external to the organisation. Certainly in the workflow space and compliance, auditability might be another key consideration. It's not just enough to be able to do things, but you might need to be able to show that those things were done in order to be able to prove compliance with all the relevant laws. And then another really big thing is the role that digital signing might play in the overall process, and whether that's something that you need within your solution or if it needs to be able to work with the digital signing solution that the broader organisation might be using. So a really key point to consider early on is just to take a look at what solutions and systems you already have access to within the organisation. Nobody wants to pay additional money to do something that they could already do with something they've already bought. So that's one of the first things that you want to investigate. is, can we already do this with other systems? And it might be something like Microsoft 365, for example, which there is a huge amount of different capabilities within that suite, and a lot of that might be of quite useful, or it might not. You'll really need to consider the outcomes that you need, and then look at these alternatives and work out, can they actually do what I need as well as I need to do it? Or if they can't, have we got a problem? So the solutions that we've been looking at as part of the earlier part of this series are all specialist tools. And as you can see, when you look into the videos on the Techie Tuesday site, they've all got specialist capability, and each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses. And they wouldn't be able to survive if they weren't offering at least something that was new and distinctive. So the key for you will be to look at whether you have enough knowledge of what you could do if you had one of these specialist systems compared to what you can do if you're just using the capability within a more general business system. I was talking to somebody just this morning in a procurement space, and he's currently grappling with this very issue where the organisation has an enterprise system which has a module that he's been encouraged to use for procurement. But having looked into it, he's finding it very frustrating because he can't really see that it can do a lot more than what he could already do just using Excel. And so he's finding, in terms of what he would really like to do in terms of lifting the capability and the results the procurement team can deliver, that if he has to use that other system, he's going to be severely constrained. It's not something that he feels that he could just live with or work around. It's actually going to fundamentally affect his ability to deliver on his job. In terms of this concept of using a free system or one that's already been paid for, you have to bear in mind that a system's not actually free at all if it can't give you the outcomes that you need. Or if it's going to take a huge amount of your own time and effort, or time and effort of others in the organisation to be able to deliver the outcome, then that's not really free either. There is an opportunity cost from delay in terms of these things, and there's a real cost of the time people have to spend to build a new solution compared to what they might otherwise be doing. Security is obviously something which is really top of mind for people when looking at any new form of technology. And it is obviously very important, but the requirements and the testing approach that you take should also really depend on the context. And most of the solutions that you're going to be looking at, if not all of them, are going to have a really good security story anyway. But it's also worth keeping in mind that a lot of the information that goes through these systems really isn't actually that sensitive, and it might not matter particularly if it was to be available to a wider audience. And also they may not be mission critical systems in terms of if it was to be unavailable for a few hours or even a few days, it might not matter that much. So the way to look at it is just to work through what would happen if the system was hacked, what would be the implications if the information was to be available to people that it wasn't supposed to be available to, and then what mitigations can be put in place. And there's several things you might be able to do at your end. You might be able to limit which information you actually input into the system. There's no reason why you couldn't decide to not put certain very sensitive information through the system and continue just to put that into the document afterwards. Or at the supplier's end, it's possible that they may be able to encrypt the information. Well, that's quite likely. You could also perhaps decide that you wouldn't store the information within the system, so you just process it, or you periodically schedule it for deletion. In terms of the ongoing availability of the system, again, how critical is it that the system is available 24/7? What would happen if it wasn't available at any point in time? And really, a lot of people have worked for 20 years without automation. And so if the system was to not be available, you can probably go back to doing what you currently do until it's back up and running. But often, again, there can be workarounds put in place that would mitigate those risks. And then I think you also need to compare the risks with the technology against the risks that are inherent in the current situation, and make sure you're comparing apples with apples. While it's easy to look at a new technology and to try and find all the possible things that might go wrong and the vulnerabilities that could potentially be there, you have to look at how secure the current process is. is digital signing really less secure than signing a wet ink signature onto a piece of paper and then scanning it and emailing it to to a lot of people, compiling copies and having things sitting on printers. If you're just going to take the information and the document out of the system and then stick it on an email and send it around, then that's really not a great secure way of doing things either. Really important consideration that really gets to the heart of licensing challenges is working out who actually needs to use the solution and how they need to use it, because each of the different softwares comes with its own different licensing models, and these can really vary, and one model will work really well in one situation but not in others. So one common model that's still used is a per user per annum licensing model, where you actually have either a named set of users or potentially a number of users at a particular time. Some models run on more of a per workflow basis, where you pay for each workflow, and that might then get progressively cheaper as you add more and more workflows, and possibly even scale up to an all-you-can-eat type of approach where you're just paying one amount for unlimited usage. Other software might come on a per month basis, and there might be different tiers that of those monthly charges depending on which features you want to add on. It's possible to do a volume-based price, perhaps on a per document or per page or per process. And there's also value pricing, where just based on your particular circumstances and what you're looking to do, you can reach an agreed price with the supplier. So they really depend on what you need. So per user, for instance, that won't work so well if you've got a self-service model in mind, where you really want potentially thousands of people across the organization to have access to the tool so they could generate an NDA if they even need to. But in fact, there's only a few hundred NDAs that will be generated across the organization each year. However, per user can be absolutely great if you've got a small team of super users that all they're doing is generating documents day in, day out. Then the return on that can be staggeringly good. Per workflow, that might be quite an expensive way to start. If you're thinking about starting with an NDA, for instance, something very, very simple, but the pricing could start to become a lot more effective as you're adding more workflows in, getting the discounts, and also perhaps choosing workflows that are a bit more complicated but add a lot more value back to the organization. So you really want to try and work out how do you start small and be able to build up as your capability and kind of the ability to see opportunities increases. And it might be that you can optimize your business process around some of the opportunities or the challenges of the licensing model. So you could potentially have a small team of super users that are preparing the documents and find some other way to get the information to them that they need to be able to generate without everybody in the organization needing to have a license. Now we also need to look at the whole solution that's required and who's going to create that, because most of this is just software, right? It's just a software platform, and it's pretty much a blank canvas when you first start. So somebody still needs to go through and identify the problems and the opportunities that are there, design what an ideal solution would look like, build it, manage and maintain kind of all the stakeholders and getting all their feedback, doing the training, coordinating the ongoing feedback that's required, and then managing and potentially doing the ongoing support and improvement that's required to keep this as a living, useful business system. So doing all of these is there's a lot of work involved, and it's not necessarily the same skill set that will enable one person to do it. So you have to sort of figure out, where are the gaps and how you're going to manage those. So do you need to be able to code? Many platforms are designed now as what they call no code or low code. So it's definitely possible to be able to do your own automation. You still will need to learn how to use that platform though, and you still really need to learn how to do things in accordance with best practices, because you're trying to create something that will be able to be used reliably and in a scalable way for like a core business process, and that people are going to be happy to use and adopt. You basically got to try and figure out how you're going to combine the knowledge of the platform with the knowledge of the process. And you've got to have time to be able to do that. So if there are gaps, if you can't do all of that, then how will you fill them? And this is where you want to check whether the supplier has consultancy services that they offer, and on what basis do they do that? Do they have partners that they can recommend who can do that for them? Do you have internal teams in the organisation that can help? I was on a call today with another customer, and their internal IT team are really excited to be able to help them to do some extra things with Power Automate to build on some initial automation that we've done. So when you've got a supportive internal team that's happy to help, then that could be really great. But if they've got other priorities and they're not willing to help, then that could be a real challenge. As always, you need to sort of look at what are the costs and the timeframes involved to get you to the outcomes that you need. The timing is really important. These specialist tools with the drag and drop no code functionality in there, you literally can build solutions within a couple of days or a couple of weeks, where it could take months or even longer to do with a general business system that the IT team may be recommending, if it can even be done at all. So the speed of delivery can be amazing. And even within the specialist kind of legal automation platforms, you might find that one platform could be considerably quicker than another for various reasons, whether that's because of an existing integration with another system, or they've already basically built an automated process very similar to the one that you need that they could just move across and deploy for you. So those timing differences could be really valuable, because one of the key things you need to consider is how urgent is this issue that we need to fix? How much is it costing us each month that it's not fixed? And that way, if it's going to take like a few extra months or maybe a year or even longer to be able to fix it using one option compared to another, then there are real costs of that delay. And the software is actually only one, perhaps potentially very small part of the overall cost that you'll want to consider. Can the platform scale? So real world business processes can become very complex very quickly. There's all sorts of nuances that will start to emerge as you start to work through the different scenarios and work out that if different people want to be involved in different ways, that you're expecting information in different formats. And so as you sort of start to do these projects, you realize that there's potentially a lot of customization and flexibility that you'll require in order to be able to make things work as well as you really need them to. Of course, the standard supplier demo is probably going to be designed to showcase the strengths of the software and hide the weaknesses. And they'll want to make it look a lot, or as easy as possible, and perhaps easier than it actually is. So you're really going to need to focus on the scenarios that you'll need to use the software for, and the complexities that you'll know are present in them. A couple of years ago, I was involved in a process where an organisation was looking for a technology solution, and they kind of got off on the wrong footing by having a spreadsheet with hundreds of rows of really technical evaluation criteria, but there was nothing in there to really indicate what it was that they were trying to or planning to achieve. And when we asked what the business processes were that they were going to use software on, they said they didn't know, but they were going to choose the best software and then work out what they'd use it for. So a couple of years on, I understand they still haven't really been able to get that software working for them because the realities of what they really needed were a lot more complicated than the solution that they've gone with is ideally set up to achieve. And you don't want to get into a situation where your key business processes, the things that you rely on to be able to deliver the products and the value that your business offers, are being constrained by the limitations of the software. And the alternative, though, if your scenario really is quite straightforward, you definitely don't want to be overpaying for a whole lot of features that you won't need or potentially be able to use either. So it's about making sure the platform works for what you need it for. And a really great way to be able to test if you've got a good fit for this requirement is to do a proof of concept, where effectively you can sort of create an initial scope of work that will prove the key things that you need to see before deciding whether to go further, and to be able to quantify what the benefits of going further will be. Another topic that Terry and I were just chatting about before the webinar started was whether it's better to have one system that does everything, or maybe several solutions that are integrated. And I don't think there's any real consensus on this. Certainly some platforms claim that they can do everything, and they certainly will do some things very well. But I think you've always got to ask yourself, how realistic is it that they can do everything really well? It might be that they can do everything that you need to the level that you need it to, which would be great. But again, if there's gaps there and they're not able to do the essential things that you actually need, that's going to be a real problem. You might find as well that there are some things that you already have as part of other software or solutions in the organisation that you're going to continue using, and so you won't want to pay twice for redundant capability. If you're already storing your documents in a document management system, then you wouldn't want to be paying for document management within any new technology that you're licensing. On the flip side, you've got some systems which really are designed to only do one thing or maybe a few things, and to try and do those extremely well. And they definitely will need to be integrated into the broader business process. When I say integrated, I don't necessarily mean that they have to be sort of technologically integrated where there's a seamless flow of data between the two systems. It's just that the people who are doing the work need to be able to easily use each system in the way that they need to get the outcome they need. Because it might be that the cost of a more, I guess, seamless integration outweighs the real benefits. If it's only going to save a couple of minutes, or the risks of rekeying a little bit of information are very low, then it might just be easier to continue with that than to worry about trying to tightly integrate. Customization versus configuration is another key thing. When you buy a computer, you expect that you're just going to be able to take it out of the box, turn it on, and it'll work, and it'll do most of the things that you need it to do. When you buy technology and then you try and use it in ways that it wasn't designed for, that's when you can get into a real area of risk. So you really want to know, what are we going to be able to do with this technology pretty much out of the box? What's going to be easy to be able to do? And then what can we do with just configuring things using existing settings that are available in the admin console, for instance? And hopefully there's a lot that you can do just using those features and functionality. If you do feel that you need to customize even further, you've got to be really clear in terms of what it is that you're looking to do, and why it is that you need to do that, and what outcomes you're seeking to achieve from doing that. And then you can work out what the cost will be, who's going to do it, how they're going to do it, when, and what cost. Another good thing to consider in this kind of context is, how much are you willing to change yourself? Because while you might have your own existing ways of doing things, and they might be great ways of doing it, it's possible that there's a lot of other ways that you could also do things, and that they may be just as good, if not better, and will work really well with the software. So instead of trying to change the software to fit around the way you work, how much is it possible for you to change the way you work to fit really nicely with what the software can do? So training is another essential area. I don't think it matters so much with some of the initial stuff that you might start with. If you're just looking to do an NDA generator tool or something like that, where there's only a few simple questions that have kind of been idiot-proofed to make it easy to answer anyway, then it's really not going to be such an issue or a challenge. But as you start to progressively work further and further into the business processes, and the automation is starting to become pretty much a core business system, something that you're relying on to be able to deliver the essential services or products that the business delivers, then you really need to make sure that you understand how it works and how to get the most out of the investment you've made, and to make sure that you don't sort of run into issues that could easily be avoided. So that's where training will really come in. So you'll be wanting to look at, what does each supplier offer in that regard? Do they have written training manuals? Do they have videos that help step through various key processes? Some will have online courses or academies that you can work your way through in your own time. They may offer in-person training that you can attend. So once you know what those options are, you'll obviously be keen to know whether or not that's free or comes within the subscriptions that you're already paying, or if it's some additional cost for that. And then you'll also need to make sure that the people on your side are going to take advantage of that training. Certainly something we're always keen to offer our customers, but really busy people, it can sometimes be hard to get them to take the time to invest in training to save more time down the line. The product roadmap's also really essential. All of the solutions, certainly the ones that we've looked at as part of the earlier parts of this series, they're just improving at such a rapid pace. If I think back to, it's 2015 when we set up Lawhawk, and the options that were available then and the functionality that was available to us compared to what's available now, I mean, it's just been such a huge change. And, next year there'll be, further improvements, and the year after that. Things really do advance at a rapid pace. And I think one of the key things is to note that just how much faster the improvement will be compared to solutions that your IT team might be offering to build for you, for instance. And that's much more likely to be something that's quite static, or that you're going to have to sort of request those improvements to be made for you. And so this really can de-risk things a lot for you, because even if you go with a solution and there's some things that it can't do today, if they're the type of things which you and many other customers are asking for, then it's pretty likely that there'll be types of things that will be on the roadmap and will get added in the near future at possibly no extra cost. So one of the key things would be to look at what's currently in the product, but also what's coming and when, and whether you'll have to pay any more for it. And there's always opportunities to be able to submit your ideas, things that you would find useful, and good companies will be keen to hear that type of feedback, so they can actually incorporate that into their roadmap. So you can have quite a lot of influence over the roadmap if you're prepared to take the time and contribute. Ongoing support is another crucial area. These are key business processes that we'd be talking about, and they can't just be static. That the business world is increasingly dynamic and fast-paced, and whatever systems are being used to deliver them also needs to be able to adapt quickly with them. And you don't want to be waiting for months or even years to get updates to be able to keep up with the changing requirements. So you want to think about what ongoing support will the supplier offer. Have they got a customer success team? How does that work? How will they work alongside you to make sure that you're getting the expected results, or be able to step in and help if you're not? Have they got partners and resellers, and how can they help? And is there a broader user group community, other people that are using the same solutions that you are, where you can share ideas or maybe frustrations and ways to work around things? If there are any issues, you'll be wanting to know who it is that you need to contact. Can you ring them, or is it just on a service desk? Where are they based? Are they in your time zone and country, or on the other side of the world? And what are the timeframes for having any issues resolved? Customer references and case studies should be another area of real interest for you. At this stage, most of the companies that you'll be coming across have been around for a good number of years, and they should have a lot of runs on the board in terms of existing customers and projects they've worked on, and really measurable sort of, examples of what problems they solved and what the extent of the benefits were. So you want to be looking at who else has the company worked with that had similar requirements to yourselves. Have they got case studies that you can read that help you to see how things will work for you? And ideally, you might even be able to see examples of how things work. And often, if you can talk directly to those customers, they'll be really open about how the solutions work for them, or any particular issues or challenges that they've had as well. Of course, we're always a little bit nervous that even with all the best care in the world, we might still have made a mistake. And we might worry that if we can't resolve that, and as I said, there are opportunities to talk to customer success teams and to escalate issues to try and resolve things first, which is what everybody would ideally like. But it might be that it's just you've chosen the wrong solution. It actually isn't what you need. Well, I think if you've done a lot of the initial thinking and you've done the proof of concept things, then you might identify that a lot more quickly than you think, and you could actually quickly change course before you've even spent too much money. And so I think making a decision quickly and then getting on with it and finding out if it really is going to work and potentially changing course, that's still better than waiting for a year or 2 years or even longer without making any decision at all. And another really valid approach to take is to say, look, I'm just going to go with the system which meets my needs as they are now, and I know that I can achieve a lot of benefit from where I currently am at a very low cost, but I'm going to outgrow the system at some point. But when I do get to that point, I'll know that it's going to be worth making the investment to go to another system, whatever that turns out to be, because I'm going to have a lot of data and a lot of experience to be able to prove that the benefits from going from where we now are to where we want to be in the next phase will more than justify it. So there's absolutely no failure in that context, I don't think. I think it's actually a smart way of being able to look at how to get some benefit now without sort of worrying about aiming for a perfect solution that will last forever, because I just don't think that necessarily will exist. So if you do want that flexibility or need that flexibility to be able to make a change, you would want to look at what is the term of the contract and whether or not there's any ability for you to terminate if it's not working for you. And then how would you migrate to another system and how would that work in practice? I actually think it's not too hard in many respects to make that move, because a lot of the real effort in getting automation working is not so much in the application of the coding into the document. It's thinking about the overall process and how things fit together and the logic. And the logic aspects of it can easily migrate from one system to another. So I'm going to just talk now about document automation specifics and then some workflow specifics. So document automation is kind of where Lawhawk really started. I was a lawyer in the corporate and finance area for a long time, and this is where I really got into this. And I was always thinking about the most complex documents, the ones that people would come to a big law firm to prepare because they couldn't prepare themselves. And so that's where I really got into it. But there's a huge spectrum of documents that might be required, and a lot of people start off with simple documents like NDAs is where they're starting, and you certainly don't need the most advanced document automation software in the world to be able to do NDAs. But if you're going to move from NDAs up the chain and start doing more complex documents, you'll need to think about whether or not the simple tool that you might want to start with will also be able to scale for that. And similarly, you might start thinking about like one single document that you want to generate, but then as you start to sort of realize that the whole end-to-end process actually involves lots of different documents at different stages of time, that could well affect the requirements that you think you need in terms of document assembly, because some systems are really well set up to be able to spit out huge numbers of documents from a single set of data, or to bulk assemble lots of packages of documents at once, and others will be more one at a time. The formatting of the documents is also important. Not all systems are as capable when you get into questions of tables, images, whether or not you can choose to output into a Word document or a PDF, retaining your own numbering styles, tables of contents, cross-referencing, all that sort of stuff. You'll need to look at what the capability is for each of the tools in terms of that type of thing. And then repeats is another really interesting one that might sound a bit technical, but if you're looking at kind of a contract, you might have a lot of repeats. So you might have a lot of parties to a contract, and then within each of those parties, you might have different party types. And you might have a trust, for instance, and you'll need to capture the details of all of the trustees of the trust. And then within that, you might have company trustees, for instance, and you might want to capture the details of who the directors of each of those company trustees are. So you've actually got 3 levels there of data that you might need to both collect and then be able to display and format into the document. And not all systems are able to manage repeats to that level. So if you're thinking that you need to go down into those more complex levels, or in a banking context, you might have multiple facilities within a single loan agreement, that type of thing, then you'll want to test whether or not you're going to be able to do that type of thing. Integrations is increasingly of interest. You can just type all the information into an interview questionnaire on screen in your browser and complete all the information and generate your documents. But increasingly, people are looking at the fact that a lot of that data is going to be available either in somebody else's head or in some other system. And ideally, you want to be able to get that information and not have to re-key it into the system to generate the documents. So you'll be keen to look into that stuff. And workflow is the other thing that people are increasingly interested in. It's not just a case of one person who's going to have all the information, who's going to then type it all in and generate the document and then finish it off perhaps in Word. There could be several people that are involved, maybe across teams or even across organisations, and there might be somebody who's creating the initial draft and it needs to be sent to somebody else for review and possibly amendment, and then there could be sort of further collaboration before it's being sent out to other parties for negotiation. Once the document's been finalised, then you'll also need to think about whether you want digital signing to be part of it. And so some platforms are set up to be able to offer like basically a drafting, finalisation and signing, and even perhaps putting information into a contracts database, whereas others are very much sort of set up as like a first draft creation tool with the assumption that you'll then take it offline or finalise some of those other details, perhaps in other ways. In terms of workflow systems, there's lots that you could potentially think about here as well. You want to think about whether or not you can have multiple people that might be reviewers and approvers. As I said, some of the business processes in reality start to get very complicated. You'll have users that are internal and external, and you'll want the ability to be able to seamlessly go back and forwards perhaps between them without constraints. Not everything happens in a nice serial one after the other order. Ideally, to take as much time out of the process as you can, you'll want to have things happening in parallel where different people could be working alongside each other and then things can be joined back up together. One thing that in-house legal teams are quite keen on is the ability to have intake or tasks sent to a group of people rather than to particular named individuals, so that the person who's got the most capacity can just pick up the job rather than have it hard-coded that it has to go to a particular person. It's really helpful to be able to see the status of your workflows, to have dashboards and things that can help you to identify how things are working and where you might need to step in. One really interesting thing is being able to create different workflows that can all actually work together, and one workflow can flow into another one, which actually can make things a lot easier to maintain because you sort of break it up and the whole thing's not fully locked in and dependent on each other. So the ability and flexibility in that area would be of interest. Delegation of tasks from one person to another could be really, really useful. You'll be keen to look at the way that you design the workflow. I really like the Canvas approach that you see in some of the tools which have been demonstrated during this series, just making it easy for people to visually see how the logic works. And there'll be different degrees of how advanced the logic can be within the workflows. And again, going back to that thing about the complexity of the business processes, you'll need to make sure the logic can keep up with the requirements. Being able to set due dates and have the system monitor those and automatically send alerts and notifications would be another thing that could potentially add a lot of value so that due dates aren't inadvertently missed. And again, if you're interested in compliance, you're going to really want to make sure that you're not only doing all these things, but that there's an audit trail, which means that you can always go back and look at the comments and the approval actions and see exactly who did what, when, and why. A couple of other final considerations. The UX is one. I certainly know from our experience that lawyers are really particular about how the software looks, possibly more so than in terms of what it can actually do. So one of the key things that I'd encourage you to look at is to weigh up how important it is that if it looks great, but it can't actually do what you need it to do as part of your business process, then I wouldn't say that it's very helpful at all. I would be much happier to have something that doesn't look great, but that I know I can rely on 100% to do what I need it to do every day. And, if I think recently I was at an optometrist with one of my children, and I was watching the optometrist entering information on screen, and I thought the system, there was so many fields on the screen, it wasn't at all designed sort of to be super easy to help him with a chatbot interface to work his way through it. But he was an expert. He knew exactly what he was doing. He'd taken the time to learn how to use the system, and he was doing something obviously that most of us wouldn't be able to do. So I think there's always an element that if you're trying to do complex things, it's not necessarily going to be easy to make it as simple as a nice chatbot would do. On the chatbot or form, that'll very much come down, I guess, to personal preferences, but also who's going to be using it. If you've got members of the public, for instance, who perhaps aren't so familiar with the kind of content and what they're being asked, then a chatbot might be a really great way to be able to sort of bring them slowly along the process and help them to understand what questions you're asking and why and how to answer them. If you've got power users that are just doing this all the time, they're probably going to prefer a form where they can just literally smash stuff out as fast as possible without even having to read the questions, certainly any guidance. You can also obviously look at what options there are around branding and styling to make sure that the solution looks and feels exactly the way you want. And there'll be questions about whether or not you can embed the forms or whatever the users interact with within your own intranet or website as well. And a final thing that you might want to look at is just the culture of the company and other things that they do that might align with your overall values. So community contribution, for instance, do they support access to justice initiatives? Some of the software platforms do quite a lot in terms of offering their software to universities to help future lawyers come through to be more familiar with how this all works. So there's a lot of scope in terms of how companies can help with some of these initiatives as well. And Terry, that's all I've got. So is there any questions?
It was fabulous. I certainly have one for you while folks are thinking of some others and putting them in the Q&A bubble. Thank you for a fabulous presentation. I loved it, Jean, because it was just so practical, and so comprehensive. And the question that I wanted to ask you was this, because what you've described is almost a journey, really, from the beginning to the end in terms of obviously choosing the solution, but then actually making sure that you can implement it. And I was wondering, because as I was listening to you, there's a lot of kind of different specialist areas there that you probably have to bring in at different places. Is it important to assemble that team of specialists up front and then bring them along with you through this whole journey? And I'm going to ask that, if I can just put another layer to that, it might be easier to say yes if you're working in a large law firm or a large legal department in-house. But what, if anything, that changes about that if you're a smaller law firm or a medium-sized law firm or legal department?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people you need to have involved. I think it all comes down again to just being really clear about what the outcomes are, and sort of saying, look, I don't necessarily have a fixed view exactly how we're going to get there or who's going to do what, or but I need to be able to do this, and then that the company should be able to help you to say, look, we can do this, but you're going to need to bring in some extra expertise, and either we can do it or we can introduce you to somebody who can do it, or here's another way that other people have done it. But I think it's just, if you're really clear about what it is that you need to do, it becomes a lot easier to then work out how you're going to get there. It's actually very easy to get distracted by all the features and sort of the thought that we're going to do it all and it's going to be super easy, and like it's only going to take a couple of months. But it's just, a lot of it is hard work, methodical kind of ticking off things to make sure that you're getting to where you need to as quickly as you can, because if you've picked the right area, the benefits from getting there will be substantial.
Yeah, beware all too many shiny things, right? Then don't kind of get distracted. The other question I was going to ask you is this. In terms of folks having legacy systems, or I'm going to call it legacy software, clearly not very technical language there, but a lot of people are going to have them, and most people are going to have them. So how do you, as you've gone through this journey with your own clients, how do you manage that in terms of obviously what's potentially much better that's coming onto the marketplace? And I was listening to what you were saying, before about having the capacity to expand with whatever you get. But I'm talking in that kind of first interface where you've got the legacy systems and you're now thinking about choosing a better, different solution.
Yeah, so I mean, my own experience and journey was probably along those lines of I just wanted to create my documents, and so I got a what you'd call a point solution, and it wasn't integrated with anything. I could literally just upload my templates into like a cloud portal, and I could access them from wherever I needed to create my documents. It wasn't dependent on anything else, but I know that it can be integrated with a whole bunch of other things, and not all software can be integrated as easily. So this one was good because it's like, well, down the line, if it made sense to integrate it with some other system, then that would be possible, but I don't have to. So it doesn't really stop you from achieving some good quick wins that in themselves are really valuable. I just see too many people, I think, who are kind of like, oh, well, maybe, like our practice management software, like they're going to do an upgrade next year. Maybe I've been saying that for a while now, but it's kind of, you're kind of dependent on them to decide to prioritize it, and maybe document merging is just never going to be something they're particularly good at, or it's just not the top priority because somebody else said they want a better time recording feature because that's what they're most interested in. So I think that's where those point solutions can actually be really useful. And then maybe down the line you go, look, we do want to move on to some other platform because there is a more integrated overall solution. And like I said, it's not that hard to necessarily see how you could then port across, because you've already done the hard work of thinking about what the logic is and how you want to do it. So if you rebuilt it into the other system, you'd be doing that because you know that you're going to be so much better off than just continuing with the standalone solution that's still working for you.
Yeah, but it is also having the eye to the market all the time, isn't it? You may not buy it today, but you may need it tomorrow, or presumably your own business is going to evolve over time as well, right?
Yeah, we're always looking at new stuff that's coming. There's some really smart people that are always working on, like cool new things. It's just that sometimes it takes a while to figure out how you would actually use that, or kind of like what benefit you would get from it. So, there's an element of like, yes, there might be better things that come in the future. But, the software, that's what I was saying, is like all of these platforms, if you looked at any of the companies that have been presenting during the early part of the session and you looked at what they were doing last year or the year before, like it's almost like they're new products in some respects, because it's like the Neoda have just completely rebuilt all of their kind of canvas and stuff. So you don't have to actually switch like from supplier. You just kind of like go, wow, like they've brought out a new thing. I get emails from Checkbox all that every month there's a new a new series of things that they've added in, just because they're such a new company. They're just constantly adding new features, and you don't have to pay anything more for it. You just kind of along for the ride. So it's not even a case necessarily that kind of somebody else will do something really cool and you'll have to switch. It's just kind of like your company probably will do something as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jean, thanks very much again. Fabulous, as I say, fabulous presentation. I know folks have taken lots of away from this that have been really useful, and thank you everyone also for attending. As I said at the outset, this is episode 5, so we're moving into episode 6 on the 11th of October. And that session is going to be a focus on legal workflow automation and a deep dive into data as well. So if workflow and data are things that you're working with on a regular basis, then that's certainly going to be a session you want to jump into. And that's going to be led by Mark Tyndall from Neoda Logic. And his guest will be Peter Dobkins from PwC Australia New Law. So folks, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter if you kind of want to receive these pieces of information directly. But otherwise, that is the end of episode number 5. Again, Jean, thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you back here for episode 6. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Terry.